I would say keep it fun
Mm.
forever. Not as long as you can. Keep it fun forever. And it's so like cliche, but I think it's important for a guy like myself, where things didn't work out, to really hammer that home. And even if you're a 13-year-old and your dad's like, annoying you about the going training and all that, find a way to keep it fun. Even if that's, I see a lot of young athletes, if they're doing football year round, that's where it doesn't become fun. So maybe you pick up another sport, maybe you have a different pursuit. And I promise you, you're not going to miss out if you take a 3-month, 4-month hiatus and play basketball or golf or whatever, and then come back with new energy in your sport. Even if it's later on, like for me, I look back at my college career, and this is where I struggled. I struggled to keep it fun. It was so intense for me. And I look back with some compassion for myself on that, because I mean, it was USC football. It was the highest stakes, but the guys that I played with that had the most success, I look at a Sam Darnold, I look at a Juju Smith-Schuster, I look at a Leonard Williams, who's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. Those guys kept it fun first. Those were not the guys that were pounding their head against the pavement every single day. They were the guys that I mean, Juju and Leonard, like, they were goofing around a little bit, but that's because of that's why that's why they had success. I firmly
Mm.
believe that, is they didn't tap into this just heaviness in the weight of the sport. And so if you're a guy that's listening to that and say, Max, like, I relate to your mindset more. I'm intense. I really want this. I'm not necessarily Leonard or Juju. I would push you to talk to someone, talk to a sports psychologist if you can, to try to unlock maybe those moments in your workout or your practice routine where you're adding more weight to your training and your practices, and try to utilize some strategies to not get going down the path. Because there are tactical ways that I think you can intentionally not put yourself in those weight of the world on my shoulders that I think would have freed me up, especially early on in my career. Wouldn't have put as much pressure on myself. Would have had more fun for sure, which is not only more enjoyable, but I would pound the pavement to say that you'll play better as a result as well.
I love that, man. You got a few more minutes to do a little, kind of have some fun with a few more memories I'm curious about?
Do it.
All good? Beautiful. Is there any I mean, I love the idea of keeping it fun, man, because it's such a beautiful reminder. That's always the thing, is like taking yourself too seriously. It's like you're robbing yourself. I find of the moment sometimes where it's like, you look back and you're like, God, like it's like that idea is like you climb Mount Everest, you're so excited about Mount Everest that you forget to just take a look at the view when you get to the top. You're like, all right, I checked this thing off. What's the next thing? You're just slugging along to the next thing on the to-do list. Is there anything, man, like this is the question I want to know first is, I love when people talk about what they're passionate about. And I think that you have this, and football is a game that I love as well. Like I mean, granted, I played a little bit in high school, didn't have any numbers next to the old recruiting pro, but it's fine. It's fine. If it wasn't for my bum knee, but we'll get into that another time.
Yep.
I'm just kind of curious, man, what do you love about football, man? I just want to know, like, what is it about that game that you just love?
There's something to be said about when you have full grown men running like full steam ahead at each other. Like, I mean, the stakes could not be higher. Like, your body's on the line. There's a lot of sports where your mentals are on the line, where your skills on the line, but it taps into something different that I have never experienced with anything else in my life, when you are getting hit full speed. And I just think the challenge there, the prep that goes into it, the stakes are as high for me as really anything. And some people might hear that and say, Max, it's just a game. But when you're out there, it just taps into something different. And that, combined with the fact that you need to count on people, 10 of them by your side when you're on the field, and then a team of 100 of guys that you're not necessarily best friends with. You might not even be friends with them. You might even be enemies with them, but you need to rely on those people. They come from different backgrounds, just the whole, I mean, they call it the greatest team sport for a reason. Both those factors, to me, taps into something that is incredibly unique to the game of football. It channels a different mentality, the camaraderie, the fire that's lit as a result of that. And then just the experiences, the joy, the fulfillment when you do win, because there are so few opportunities. So much prep goes into so few opportunities. in high school it was only what 12 games max if you're lucky, and then in college it's what 15. For the amount of prep, that's very few opportunities. I think all those factors make it super special, super precious, and love the game of football as a result.
Who's your team?
I grew up outside Seattle, so I'm a Seahawks fan. But if I'm
Beautiful.
being honest, the older I get and I work in football as well, the fandom kind of decreases.
Okay.
And you love just kind of being around the sport, but I'm a USC, I'm a Pitt guy, and then a Seattle Seahawks guy.
I love it, man. What do you think about this narrative surrounding Russ right now? I'm a Seahawks fan as well. That's the team that I've been supporting ever since that Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl. Remember watching that in the back of a rented out pub with my basketball team in high school, and just like that was the day I was just like, oh my god, this is like that peak Legion of Boom, Camp Chancellor, Richard Sherman. It was so exciting, and I never really watched a lot of football until that game, and then afterwards it was just like it was open it up. What do you think about like what's going on with Russ right now? I feel like this is like one of those conversations that kind of ties in a little bit to like what we were talking about earlier with this idea of failure, where you win a Super Bowl, you literally get to the top of the mountain, you win a Super Bowl, you're one of the greatest quarterback in Seahawks history, and then you go somewhere else, and all of a sudden people are just like kicking you around and oh, you're playing yourself out of the Hall of Fame, and you're a bust, and you're a failure, and it was always the system and all these things. I feel like you can't win sometimes, and it's kind of tough to see even these guys who get to that point and still take like the flack at every single turn. It seems like somebody's got something to say.
It's a good point. It's a good question. I think Russ is an absolute stud, and it would not surprise if I'm a betting man, he rebounds this year for a big year without a doubt. But I'll say this: Russ has a mentality where the sun is always shining, and even when he has a bad day, the sun's always shining, and even when he throws an interception, the sun's always shining. And I think at times he failed to realize the impact that not everyone relates to that messaging, and not everyone is going to. In fact, people are going to be turned off by that messaging when things don't go well. And I think at times that alienated, from what I've seen from afar, certain people on his team to his leadership style. He is a great leader, but I think at times that his mentality did not connect with people and alienated folks on his team that worked against him. And then when the losses start building up, that's where it's easy for people to kind of take shots at him and his mentality. And you saw it last year. He got caught in some interviews where, dude, the sun's not shining. And I think in hindsight, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what he would say. Maybe he would say this. Maybe he wouldn't admit to this now, but I'd be willing to bet he'd admit to it 20 years from now. Maybe those weren't the best answers when, you're really struggling, and then you choose to always be, positive. And I respect that mentality, but I think I think it's a fact that it does not relate to everyone. And, if I was him, I would have advised him to answer those questions. But he's a stud. I actually crossed paths with him a couple times in high school. He presented me the Gatorade National Player of the Year trophy. Cool. So I got nothing but love for him. But if we're being truth tellers, I think that's the reality of the bed that he's made for himself.
Do you think we're kind of seeing a bit of a I mean, dude, I got a sport media degree from Ryerson University, now Toronto Metropolitan University in Toronto, Canada. And I feel like one of the things we talked about so much was like more athletes are kind of getting into the media because of that idea of like just being a little bit more like, I mean, I guess more of the question is like, is there any like clip or is there any interview or question that you were asked during your time as an athlete that stands out and now you like look back on, you're like, what was this person saying? Like, this is just like, how can you ask another human being this question? Because I just think that there's a lot more players who are being like much more empathetic journalists now versus like this, like, cutthroat sports journalists have to absolutely tear somebody apart to like see what they're made of kind of thing. And I'm curious like what your experiences was with some of the questions or things that you were asked during that time.
Wi-Fi.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect. Yeah. There's one interview question that sticks out to me, and it's not going to exactly answer your question, but there's one when I got benched at USC and they put me in front of the media for that interview. And at the time, for those that don't know my story, I got benched for Sam Darnold, ended up being a top 5 NFL draft pick. So in hindsight, the coach was right. I was wrong. Should have always happened. But at the time, it was controversial. A lot of people felt like I wasn't given a fair shake. And they put me in front of the camera and they go, like, Max, what, like, why were you benched and kind of what's your outlook there? And I had an opportunity to be sun is always shining mode,
Mhm.
or be real
Yeah.
and not disrespectful, but real. And I said, they were looking for a spark. That's what I was told. And I say, guys, I'm not an idiot. I know how this thing plays out. I'm the old guy. He's the young guy. And the second you go with the young guy, it's awfully hard to ever get your spot back there. And so I'll stay ready. I owe it to my teammates, but I'm also not naive to the situation. And I could see right there that every media member respected the hell out of that answer because it was real. It wasn't cookie cutter. And I think a lot of those media members I still cross paths with today because I'm still involved with USC radio. And I think that answer gave, maybe I'm overhyping it, but I do think a level of respect that, like,
Mm.
hey, this guy's not just, oh, yay, the sun's always shining, but he's also not poor me and negative. He was real with the dynamic. You could tell there was some pissed off in my voice, but that's okay, right? You want to be
Mm.
pissed off if you got benched. And I'm really, I look back on the interview because it comes up every so often of like, that was an opportunity that I was never going to get back. You know, the interview
Mm.
after you get benched where all the cameras are around you. And I was really pleased with how I handled that, which is cool to look back on.
It's easy to piss in the cornflakes, right? I mean, that's it's exciting. It's
Yep.
exciting to hear that you went the other way with it, man. Now that you know the playing days are over, you're kind of in this new chapter of your life. You know, I taking care of your mentals. That's something that you talk a lot about on social media and just kind of on the day to day. You know, being aware of your mental health, the things that make you feel good. What are the things that you're actively doing now, just in the day to day, that is the purpose of taking care of you?
Well, monthly, I see a therapist, and
Amazing.
I think it's important to speak out about that because I don't have any pressing issue I don't have any huge issue in my life, huge pressing issue in my life. Um, I had an issue that made me see a therapist to
Mm.
start, like about a year ago or so now. But then I've kept rolling with that. I've decreased the cadence a little bit, and I'm wary that there's a financial component too. But I think it's so. I've got to the point now where it's just like I'm checking in with my coach. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm going in for training. It's just I'm checking in with myself, checking in with myself. And there's been some friction with some work stuff going on, and there's we all got stuff going on. I'm not saying I have a perfect dynamic, but it's so helpful to see a third party person that does not have a stake in your life that can give you
Yeah.
tactics and say, hey Max, maybe this is not the way to think about it. What if you thought
Mhm.
about it this way? Even little stuff, it can change the entire course of your day for sure. Your week is, I mean, your weeks and your months certainly as well. And I just think that whole dynamic is so important. And
Yeah.
I intend to keep rolling with that every single month. My therapist is awesome, and that little thing goes a long way. And for athletes out there, former athletes, I think the physical fitness is a big one as well. I feel my best. I'm operating
Mm.
my best when I'm getting that physical fitness. And my wife and I always talk about it. It's hard to get a rhythm back post athletics because I'm used to that, like,
It's probably a bit of a
grinding.
different level of intensity, eh?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
easy to kind of shit on yourself a little bit of like, man, I'm not where I once was and all that. But I do think that goes a long way with the decreasing anxiety and just getting in
Mhm.
a rhythm to your day to day.
I love it, man. I'm in therapy once every 2 weeks. It's like you said, having that like specific space, and I think that it's like it's just different in a way where it's like you can have a buddy who creates space for you, and you talk about these things, but they have the backs. They kind of have this personal connection with you versus having that person, like you said, they don't have a stake in your life. There's no like hold that they have on like who you were as a person before you joined therapy or whatever it is, and they just kind of create this very like it for me. It's always kind of felt very like a liberating space where it's like I can operate within this space truly authentically, don't have to worry about the opinions or emotions of the people around me. This is my time because of this person, like, is creating this very specific professional space to be vulnerable, be myself, and just that alone brings so much peace into my own life. So I love that therapy is a part of the routine.
And to me, what's huge there too is I think what brings about more stress for people is when they do feel the need to go see a therapist, then it becomes a whole thing. And it's like, oh, I'm seeing
Yeah.
a therapist. Versus if it's just part of your cadence, it's just like working out. It's just like
Yeah.
posting content in some regards.
Mhm.
It's just part of your process. So then who knows, in 3 or 4 months from now, something might come up that I need to address. But if it's just part of my routine, I think mentally it's easier to approach.
Yeah, it's that you know, precautionary care versus reactionary, where it's like you don't always need a reason. Sometimes it's just about that maintenance, just going into the shop, bringing the car into the shop once in a while, just to make sure that it's running at 100%. Which is, I think there's an element of stigma. That's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. Was the area that I grew up in, a lot of stigma surrounding mental health, especially with like guys, young men. It was like you don't talk about it, like nobody wants. You know, you get the pussy, you know, thrown around a lot, or like you're weak. You know, that's not what a man does, all these definitions. But when you just kind of take care of yourself progressively, and you go and get to that point where it's like just it's part of the cadence, part of the day to day, part of the routine. It really goes to show, I think, a lot of other guys too, that like when you do mention it as part of the routine, it's like, oh shit, like Max is doing all right, Kyle's doing okay, like you know, he's things in his life seem okay, and he's doing therapy, and oh shit, maybe I can too, and things won't fall apart, or the sky's not going to fall in, or my friends are going to kick me to the curb, or whatever it may be. So it's important to kind of have these conversations to help other guys. You know, you're paving the way a little bit in a weird way for guys behind you who there's a little resistance to go and get that help for themselves, take care of themselves.
Totally. I think the mental health space has come a long way the past
Yeah.
decade when I first started seeing a sports psych, but it has been very, um, extreme, right? You're either hearing like the panic attack stories or like severe,
Yeah.
even worse than that. I
Yeah,
mean,
of course.
or nothing. And I
Yeah.
do think there's a space, and probably more people play in that middle ground space, which is where I'm at right now. And I think there's a huge message there, no doubt.
I love it, Max. I appreciate your time today, man. This has been a ton of fun. This has been a blast. I appreciate everything, taking the time, the vulnerability, talking about your story, man. It means a lot. I'm excited to get this one out.
Appreciate it, man. This is fun. Yeah, no, very insightful questions. So
Thank
you can
you.
tell you've been doing this for a while. So keep crushing it. Yeah, thanks for having me on, man.